This week, we welcome Nicole Jiang, CEO and co-founder at Fable Security, and Rinki Sethi, CSO at Upwind Security, to discuss security that sticks, shaping human behavior. In the leadership and communications segment, inside the CISO mind, how security leaders choose solutions, 2026 leadership strategy, mastering agility and anticipation for better decisions, the most human strategic sought-after tool in leadership, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. AI gives attackers superpowers, and your employees are the soft target. Flip the script with Fable Security, the modern human risk platform. Fable's powerful risk engine connects the dots on human vulnerabilities, like password hygiene, phishing risk, and data sharing and generative AI, and deploys hyper-targeted snackable AI nudges and briefings, just in time, right where your people work. The result? Hard outcomes. 13x faster behavior change, 60 to 90% risk reduction. Make Fable part of your cybersecurity story. Visit securityweekly.com/Fable. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 418, recorded October 20th, 2025. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me remotely for this interview segment is my co-host, Mr. Ben Carr. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Matt. How you doing today? Big F1 weekend down here in Austin.
I know you guys are gonna be busy down there this weekend.
Yeah, we will.
And I'm just gonna be watching football as I always do.
That's my sport. Cars. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right, one quick announcement, and then we'll get into this. Don't miss InfoSec World 2025, October 27th to 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. Cybersecurity pros, workshops before and after, and endless networking. Save 25% with code ISW25-SW by visiting securityweekly.com/ISW 2025. This segment is sponsored by Fable Security. Visit securityweekly.com/Fable to learn more. Nicole Jiang is the co-founder and CEO of Fable Security, the human risk platform that shapes employee behavior in real time. She was previously a founding team member and head of product at Abnormal Security, where she scaled the company from pre-revenue to a $5 billion valuation. Earlier in her career, Nicole held product and engineering roles at Mixpanel, Microsoft, Palantir Technologies, and Pixley, building products across AI, SaaS, and security. Rinki Sethi is the CSO at Upwind Security, where she leads global information security and technology functions while driving strategy across marketing, go-to-market, and customer engagement. She previously served as Chief Information Security Officer at Rubrik, Twitter, and Bill, and held leadership roles at PG&E, eBay, Intuit, and Palo Alto Networks. Beyond her executive's role, Rinki advises startups and serves on boards, including ForgeRock. She is also a strong advocate for diversity and mentorship in cybersecurity, actively supporting organizations like Women in Cybersecurity. Ladies, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Matt. How often do you get to say ladies like that?
I don't. I was almost outnumbered today. I was ready to do this interview by myself just in case, and it would be fun to be outnumbered, actually. Rinki, I've tried to get you on the show before. You've always have an open invitation, so it's glad to have you on the podcast for your first time. Nicole, welcome as well. Thank you. All right, we're gonna get into this. So
let's do it.
I'm gonna set this up for you, Nicole, to get started. Here's a fact. We can debate the number, but here I'll keep it simple. The majority of breaches start with human error, whether it's 60, 70, 80, I don't really care. We got a human error problem in the industry. So I think the problem's clear. Where I want to start is we've spent a lot on security awareness. We spent a lot on phishing. But yet we haven't moved that human error needle very much, have we?
No, not quite. That number seems to hover around the same, to your point. 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 9 out of 10, everyone the number should be much lower, and we like to make that, much lower with Fable.
So why? Maybe Rinki, you can help me here a little bit. Look, we've spent a lot of time addressing things like security awareness and training and phishing, but why isn't it working? Like, what fundamentally is wrong with it, just the basic training's not working?
And I've studied this for a long time. I'm very passionate about this topic. A lot of the training to date has been focused on driving compliance requirements. When you think outside of that, so you take these annual trainings that are massive, everybody just clicks through it, turns the sound off, you're doing other things. And that to me is kind of checking the box for compliance and not truly trying to drive change in behavior within a company. I think you don't get to train people just when you feel like training them. That's not when folks kind of like change their behavior. You change their behavior when they need to be trained. And that means that if you're in line with kind of when they're about to do something, either to prevent it or to train them, hey, maybe you could do something differently, that's when it sticks in your brain. And continuing to do that is what drives true behavior change.
So now I'm going to go to Nicole. We've attempted this in the past. Mm-hmm. There's been a few solutions out there that have attempted to solve the human risk management problem. Why haven't they been successful?
Yeah, Matt, this is a great question. And I know you and I have a lot to talk about here as well. I think there's a couple of things going on. First of all, I came from abnormal security. So I saw firsthand attacks evolving from the email vector. And I've also seen how training, despite the fact that everyone does it, there are compliance reasons, we do it once a year. I'm really seeing that lagging. Folks aren't really evolving the training to the pace of threat vectors and threat actors innovating on that front. I really saw this, not just at Fable, but in the last few years as AI further advanced. Attackers are really leveraging it to target employees. They've really scaled out their methods, right? Technique sophistication to a scale that it's really hard for solutions to even further catching up. So there's already a problem that's a little behind. And I'm really seeing this cat and mouse game where attackers are winning if we don't do something about it in the human layer. What we talked about before is, when I see the market and when I see solutions that are being used by customers, I see a lot of generic, annual, very long, dry training. Everyone gets the same, right? Rinki, you've been in the cyberspace for a while. You are an expert. An intern and you gets the same security training on an annual basis. It just doesn't make sense. I think that's really, really broken. And here we are with Fable. We're trying to leverage data, understanding of employee behavior to create that just-in-time, relevant, but also something that ties into emerging threats. And I think the technology also is finally here to allow us to make it happen with a mix of AI, behavioral data science, and some secret sauce that we have here at Fable to make it happen.
So, I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far, right? Like, this is a problem that we've seen in the industry for a long time. I guess I boil it down to, I don't think anyone cares, right? And what I mean by that is the people who are getting the training, they look at it as just, look, I've got to get this done. I've got to click through, right? And I think that's the presentation's been bad, some of the things we mentioned. But I also don't think the value is being placed by security leadership in security awareness training, right? Because they haven't seen the return on the investment. They haven't seen that the dollars that they spend actually change the bubble at all, or the metrics. Is what they see is actually the change in behavior or culture. And I think actually culture is the more important part in the organization. I kind of equate it to, like, my son is going through driving stuff right now. He's just got his permit 2 weeks ago. And we're on the road and he's like, I'm trying to explain, putting a turn signal on every time you need to do something. And he's like, why am I doing this, Dad? Like, nobody else has their turn signal on. And I'm like, yeah, that's because, like, after you've been driving for a while, you kind of don't worry about it anymore. But the education, the training, and the impact of actually, like, we get frustrated when somebody doesn't have a turn signal on and they turn in front of us, right? So we know why it's important, but we don't make that connection to the actual changing the culture. How do we change the culture here? Like, what do you do differently that actually is going to get in front to change the desire on the end user? and to change the impact analysis of Rinki and myself?
Yeah, Ben, this is a great question. And there's so many things to dive in. Maybe taking a step back, like, why do you think? I think there's a difference between, do people care about training or do they care about like being personally targeted? And in the event of it happening, can they do something about it? I would actually challenge and say, like, training is a solution, but the problem is getting worse, right? Like no one wants
Yeah.
to be targeted. No one wants to fall for something. No one wants to be in a company, right? Be that one person to do something that causes the entire company to go down. So I would actually say, like, the problem everybody really cares about, I think the biggest frustration is around the solution. Would you agree?
So I think the solution is certainly it. So I've seen some companies that have done some interesting stuff. So I had some good experience in my past where we used comedy and comedy connected because people enjoyed the interaction, right? They like it was actually the weirdest experience I ever had. I actually had people coming to me and saying, "Hey, when's the next episode going to come out? Because we enjoy this," right? And so that was a connection for me of understanding that it can't just be about very dry content. It's got to connect and resonate with people culturally of where they are. But also, I
Sure.
think, like, to your point is really great. If you say that people don't want to be the cause of the problem in the organization, I agree. But I also don't think they're necessarily connecting that, right? They're not seeing the impact of, oh, Bob did this and like we had this massive impact. I mean, I don't think we're doing a good job of
Right.
tying that back as leaders.
Right. I have a pretty opinionated approach here.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody does training, right? I've also done through this as soon as we enter our professional careers. Um, I think, I think the goal is to really engage employees and meet them where they're at. I think comedy, while works, I think it gets attention, but I actually think it downplays the significance of security risks, right? It's like, I don't think people should
Yep.
be learning things from comedy. I think people should be learning things that's of value, that's impactful to them. And so the way Fable is doing this is actually, I would say it's somewhat novel. We take a deeper look at understanding who our employees are, their roles, what they do. And we think from the attacker's perspective, right? Like, if I'm trying to get into an organization, what are the likely mechanisms I would do to social engineering them to, do X things? It could be password authentication, devices, money, you name it. We kind of know all the entry points into a person and also to an organization.
And
It's
that'll
one thing to
differ
say,
depending upon who the person is, right?
exactly, exactly. Ben, again, you're very security conscious, so you probably have higher defenses. But for someone, let's say in the finance team, right, they probably process a ton of invoices on a daily
Yeah.
basis. It's very easy to make a mistake. And as we know, threat actors are always evolving their mechanisms. And so you might just slip, right? Just as when you learn one way, where um, people might fall for threats and you watch out for that. And then attackers go and say, whoops, let's try a new mechanism and see if they're paying attention. So to me, I think the most valuable way to help people is that just-in-time mechanism where we're constantly letting our employees know what are the latest ways attackers are trying to target an individual and create, again, today we leverage AI to do that rapid response. Now, it's one thing to say, Ben, like, please change your password, please do it now. Like, you probably find me super annoying. But if I say, look, all of your, like, everybody in the company, our neighbors, our adjacent businesses are getting targeted and we could lose our jobs. All you have to do is change your password today to a safer one, right? Make a fun one, like, doesn't matter. It really changes the action because people understand the impact of it and how much they can make people's lives easier. Sharing that context goes such a long way. And I think as an industry, we've spent a lot of time to tell people what to do, but we don't explain why that matters. Makes perfect sense, right? It's like you teaching your son how to drive. It's not about you should turn the light on. It's more about this prevents you from having an accident.
Yeah,
This
it's the
prevents
why.
the next person coming into you. This is really great etiquette that's going to reduce it's going to really reduce the potential downside of accidents down the line.
I think one of the big challenges, I've equated this to safety. I worked nuclear power for 7.5 years of my career. Safety was an important piece, right? Because it was life or death, right? You
Yeah.
step somewhere, you could die, right? And how do we get that kind of sense of safety from a security perspective? And to me, that means you have to notify them, you have to interact with them in the moment. And that's been the hard part, I think, in this in what we've seen so far up to date, Nicole, is how do you interact when it's actually happening, when they're actually clicking on the link, or when they're actually, looking at email or whatever it is, right? Like getting them at that time to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, what I just did, oh, that was crazy. Like, okay, now I know why I shouldn't do this, right? Because that will stick better than anything else I think we could ever do.
Yeah, there's two ways I kind of look at this. I think number one is it's sometimes people make mistakes, sometimes people aren't paying attention, and things happen. And that's why we have security layered in practice, right? To make sure we're catching different things at different layers of our security stack. To me, when I think about the just in time, I think about it in two ways. One is, if let's say as example, if I clicked on a link, if I also don't have secure MFA. I'm also sharing a ton of information that I'm like a triple threat. And so when I'm getting a ping and say, hey, Nicole, you did all these things, right, in a pretty close segment, that's a coaching moment for me where I go, oops, it's not a one thing happened, here's a follow-up, one thing happens to follow up. But it's more like I've caused more risk as a person who also is a very risky individual, right, as the CEO of the company. So that's one part of it's not just about the just-in-time, that instant, but it's finding the right time where the learnings will really stick and the impact is very great. The second piece I look at is actually more preventative, right? If you think about social engineering, it's not a if, it's a when, but you can't always be gathering signal. You just know that if you're an attacker, they're going to come after me. They're going to come after my CFO. And so it's also Fable's role to help customers proactively recognize hey, look, it's imagine, right? How do you catch bad criminals? Here's a wanted poster. Chances are you will get a message like this from an attacker that will look as such, right? If you proactively know what that looks like, you're more likely to spot it when the timing is right. So we're actually turning this around to say, we kind of know in many ways, what are some of the attacks that inevitably will happen. If we can train that muscle, then the just in time is not just about course correction. It's actually about prevention and reporting. And those metrics will really, in my opinion, drive that muscle to create that culture, which Ben, you talked about. So actually here at Fable, we're striving for more of that positive reinforcement, as opposed to the just in time, caught you in the act. It is a coaching moment, but it's also that, it's a negative tick, right, for the culture piece.
That's the balance. That's the hard part, I think, right? Is catching them at the right time, making it stick. You're doing some really interesting things from a content perspective, which, what I've traditionally seen, okay, I click on a bad email, so you enroll me into a phishing campaign, and oh my gosh, here we go, right? You're a little more targeted, right? And a little more specialized in what you're delivering from a content perspective.
Yeah, that's right. So today, I think we're doing some things that are really neat on the content generation perspective. So we generate, multimodal, many different types of forms of interaction. We call them personalized interventions, whether it's a short video content, think something 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes. Think it's a personalized nudge, right? So Matt, you're getting hey, I know you're having a busy day, but you did this thing. That doesn't look so good, right? Can you acknowledge, do something differently? In terms of our content generation, we leverage a lot of AI to generate, again, based on risk profile, based on emerging threats that we see. So we tie that whole picture into hey, we noticed it is one thing. Did you know that that's the reason why this major attack that recently happened, right? That's the cause of the human error. Here's what we can do differently. And that really hits home with our employees. When they get it, they understand the impact, and they know right away what to do differently. We also incorporate customers' policies, processes, which, by the way, are always evolving today with AI. So we're able to give that rapid, not just here's what happened, here's the impact, but also what they can do differently. tracking that action of people doing something differently, to me, is behavior change that not only is a risk reduction, but also a productivity booster for organization, right? Imagine, I'll give you an example, Matt. So imagine, many of our customers are rapidly adopting AI. The biggest challenge is your company might be using Gemini because it's part of your G Suite. So you're trying to say like, hey guys, use Gemini, don't use GPT, don't use these other tools, right? Let's keep it really, really secure. So instead of telling people, hey, I caught you use GPT, don't use it, Fable can say in our content, we love that you're doing this. Let's just use Gemini. Here's how you adopt it. Here's how you get these prompts. If we see the Gemini usage going up and GPT usage going down, it actually has a really positive effect to an organization. And I think that contributes a lot to, both being secure, but also being productive at the company.
Yeah. And that's, I want to start to go there a little bit because I'm thinking through, how do you prove success? Where's the value, right? And how do you report this, right, Ben?
That's what I was just thinking. I was going to ask about metrics and like, how do you look at like the analysis of saying, am I making a difference? Is it working? Because that's, again, like in my initial foray into this, how do you connect it back to the, I care about this as a, as a CISO, right? Am I changing the culture? Am I impacting this? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, Rinki, I'm curious if you have like thoughts on this as well. I can go on. I have like so many data points I can share.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my points of view. I mean, I think there's two pieces to this. There's security culture, and then there's actual human behavior change and kind of the human risk metrics. And they're like similar and they impact each other. Security culture is really hard to measure, right? And we talked about this earlier about comedy versus not. Like you have the culture within your company that you're in, and you really want to bake security into the DNA of that. And that's a really hard thing to do. And it takes kind of creativity. The more you have data to go and drive the right kind of culture, the better, right? And I think one thing we've struggled with outside of phishing testing metrics or training completion metrics, we don't really have anything good to go and report and drive behavior change in a consistent manner. Like we can go and tell our teams, right, Ben, like, hey, can you go and like find data around who's not updating their laptops or who's, like exporting data externally. And then it's like a one-time exercise, but doing this on a regular basis, just in time, such that you can drive changes and then be a better partner and drive kind of the right reporting upwards. That's a really, really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and it's hard to measure culture in an organization.
Yeah.
And the culture dictates, I think I want to just call something out because I think you touched on something that's really important. You have to figure out what the culture of your org is as a business and then match the security awareness and the training and the assessment. How you're doing that, like comedy may not fit in every organization, right? Like, and it really, you have to be tailored to hit with the culture to align to the greater overall culture so that you can make a movement in the security culture of the organization.
100%. And one of the things I used to say, whether you agree with me or not, tools are a part of the culture. Like, people, I mean, look at Slack, right? As an example, people love Slack, right? And if you tell a company, oh, we want to move off of Slack because of the cost, oh my gosh, there'll be a whole uproar. And that's what Nicole and I early on were talking about. I'm like, Nicole, when we do training, it has to live within the tools that people are already breathing in and using, right? And that's part of the culture. Don't make me go to yet another place that I have to go get trained. And so I think that's a big piece of it too, that how do you embed this within the tools that the company is using? And I think that's a really important part that also impacts the culture and whether this gets embedded into the DNA or not.
Yeah, so you two touched on culture, which I think is super important, right? And aligning your program to it. The second part that you started on, Rinki, but you didn't finish, is now the metrics. Like, how do you, let's say you got the culture figured out, you got the alignment to the program, you've got to display improvement somehow, right? How do we approach that topic?
I think the important thing there is generally in companies, it's security awareness folks that drive a security awareness program. And then you have all this data that's collected on behaviors from different teams within your security organization, like security operations, like your security engineering teams. And that data is like, they have it or they may have it, and it's not aggregated for the purpose of driving human behavior change. And there's so much data there. And so the easiest thing as a security awareness person, it's like, let's go drive phishing testing because that's within my control. I can go and drive that and I can get the data. And that's just like one program. And so if you want to go get other things now, how do you prioritize within a security program, et cetera, and how do you show kind of a comprehensive picture? And so I think there's so much data now that you can pull together with Fable as an example that to like tie. And again, like data is not the point. The point is the outcome that we're trying to drive,
Right.
which is the secure behavior change. But that data is so critical to get there and then to drive consistency in reporting. And there's so much rich information that you can get. And I think the last piece I'll say is that we talked about, I think, Ben, you talked about ROI. I think like one of the key things in a human risk program too, is if you're seeing all these, all of a sudden people are exporting all this data, or all of a sudden people are using AI tools that they shouldn't be using. Like that's also should be insight into your security priorities on like, hey, should we put technical controls in place to prevent some of this because it's
The leading
becoming
indicator.
a behavior we should watch? Like go and drive a better security program. And so I think that's a huge piece. If you have the right program in place and the right tooling in place, you can also make your security program as a whole better.
So, Rinki, I want to ask you another question on kind of this culture and tools question, right? And it's not going to be readily apparent maybe from where I start with this, but diversity. So I think one of the biggest failure points that we have is actually being very myopic in where we look at how we apply resourcing into the tooling and security. And I think this area of security awareness and training and education is one of the areas where we try to bring people in from a security background into this area. And I think we're missing the boat. I think looking at people coming from outside, from psychology or from a metrics background, like applying other skill sets that we don't necessarily think about, because I've worked with some people who do this pretty well, and they don't really come from a security background. They come from something else, and they bring a different set of skills to the table that I think we're not thinking about in security. We're thinking very tool centric, and they're thinking very human centric. And I think this is a human problem.
For sure. And I think Nicole has, I totally 100% agree. I actually hired someone that came from a journalism marketing background that drove security awareness for me. And it was because you need to get the psychology of what resonates. But I think the way that Nicole is also, in fact, she was educating me the other day on like the ad tech, right? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm a security person. Like, can you break down what you're talking about? And it makes a lot of sense to me on like the success that companies have seen because they haven't applied tools to the issue, right? They're going back into like human psychology. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Ben, I think you hit something that I wanted to discuss earlier, and I think it's going to tie into the metrics part so well to the earlier question too. So the one like kind of secret sauce that we have is that our team, including our original team from Abnormal Security, we came from a machine learning ad tech business that eventually became like the Twitter's revenue engine. So ads is really interesting because if you think about it, right, like in the last 20 years, like what is a piece of technology that's drive behavior change? It's actually ads. Ads are personalized. They're just in time. They're there when you scroll through a particular website. You see actually a individual person sees about 3,000 ads on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. And it takes roughly 7 to 8 times to see the same ad for you to register a particular concept, right? But ads is so powerful because you don't even know you want a vacation or a pair of shoes and you see enough and you go, oh man, I better go purchase. They make it so easy. How do they track conversion, right? They track click through, they track purchases. That's when you know it works. But and what's really powerful about ads is it knows your intention, right? It knows that you want, like, there's something about, like, man, you keep on clicking on it, so it shows that intention. What's really interesting about Fable is that we know exactly what are some of the risk factors associated with someone. We know what a good employee security model looks like, right? What they should do, what they shouldn't do. So the answer is if we can be very personalized, relevant, just-in-time targeted with content that makes sense towards them, eventually it should convert. And so when we're thinking about interacting with employees, Rinki, to your point, meet them where they're at, whether it's Slack or Teams or email, we're trying to kind of in the same way, right? Ads don't just show up because you look at it annually. It shows up where you work, where you browse. So the similar methodology. actually applies.
I love that you're thinking about that from an ads perspective, because for me that connects and resonates. And I think if you pitched that to me as a CISO and said, look, we're applying this psychology and marketing and ad analytics to it, and if we could drive metrics out of that, like conversion rates and those kind of things, when I take that back to the business, something we talk about on the show all the time, Matt, is now I'm connecting with the business, because now I bought in the marketing, I bought in the CMO, right? I bought in the head of sales.
Sure.
Like, they get it. They can resonate with that, as opposed to some odd statistic they have no idea of understanding about. Like, we understand the security people, but they don't resonate it with the business. But now I'm putting it into business context. So I think there's even greater power to that.
What's actually really interesting is in ads, you can track real conversions, right? There's a reason why people spend billions of dollars annually to get that conversion top of funnel from a marketing sales perspective. If we can apply similar methodology algorithms to drive secure behavior, we should be seeing more secure behavior as an outcome of our efforts. And so the metrics. Exactly. So the metrics we actually showed today is really powerful. So like Rinki mentioned before, today there's a lot of simulation, click rates, report rates. That's really where one of the few, maybe only metrics that security awareness teams can drive. But today we're looking at things like adoption, right? If people are using Gen AI incorrectly, are they now using it correctly due to Fable's push to say, here are the tools, here's the policies? Because we integrate into our customers' workplaces, IAM, we see the access, right? We see how that trends move over time and exactly where Fable interjected. We see PII being committed less in developer environments because we literally spell them out. Here's how you should enter PII or not in the way that's kosher for the business. And we see that reduction over time. And so to me, what's really powerful is if we know these risky behavior, we know that they should be measurable and dropping over time. If Fable in combination with the awareness team is putting in these campaigns and efforts, right, to target this behavior reduction.
Do you measure it in relation to the interaction with that user? So, the closeness to how much the behavior is changing versus when the actual interaction happened?
Yes, we do. So this is where it's the beauty of data, right? We see certain actions and we see when they drop, and we see kind of the entry point, right, where Fable deploys and engages with them. And by the way, the interaction it's very human-like, right? Ben, I'm sure you're the same way. Like, I send you an email about something, you don't reply me. And then I Slack you, I go, Ben, seen this thing last week, take a look. And you're like, yeah, I'll get to it. And then the following week I go, Ben, this is the last time. And then you go, all right, I'm going to do it, right? We see a similar thing. Some people react right away. Some people, the second nudge, some people, the third nudge. And then sometimes you got to have, the manager come in and say, hey, I got you. You're going to do this. It's human-like. And so if we can understand the behavior and where someone's going to move, that data is so powerful because we know how to activate them when, let's say, an incident really happens or when you really need them to go do something on your behalf. For the people who are not the movers, right, chances are it's not just security awareness that you got to think about. Maybe there's something else that you got to really dig in and figure out what's happening there.
Yeah, and all that data would be really interesting to profile out all these different roles in an organization. Some roles will get it fast. Other roles may take 3, 4, 5 interactions. Like, to understand that as an executive team and a security team would be like gold, right? Because now you can really craft some of these nudges and these customizations. You can fine tune them even more, which I think could be really interesting.
Yeah, we actually, one of the biggest announcements we're sharing with the world is we're creating a set of board-ready human risk reporting that really expands, again, dimensions beyond phishing, click rates, but to really understand that risky behavior across various roles, individuals, departments, giving that further visibility. One thing we already noticed, that was an interesting piece, was again, the behavior across departments are just so different. Like the time where they react, the precision, how people behave between a sales team versus a finance team, which one they latch onto more than the other one. Again, it's really cool to show not just about did they click, did they not? But it's really about how they behave and react against security tasks and interventions. I think that just empowers not just like awareness, but how you choose to deploy security measures, right? Based on different roles and assets in your organization.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Nicole and Rinki, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Great discussion.
Yes. If you want to reduce human risk while improving human behavior, please visit securityweekly.com/Fable. Every AI workflow in your enterprise touches sensitive data. Customer names, email addresses, financial records. One wrong move and you're facing a compliance nightmare. Enter Area, the enterprise AI orchestration and security platform built to protect what matters most. With Area, you don't have to compromise between speed and innovation or security and governance. Quickly deploy AI without cutting corners on compliance. Give your teams the confidence to adapt AI with Area. Stop gambling with your most sensitive information. Visit securityweekly.com/Area to see it in action. That's securityweekly.com/AIRIA. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. All right, so let's get into this week's articles. Before we do, though, I had another co-host join. Mr. Jason Albuquerque, welcome.
Hello there. Hey, week 7 of the NFL, right? My Pats are on a winning streak. We got 3 road games in a row. We're doing pretty well there, Matt. I can't complain at all.
Yeah, and we definitely found out that the Browns are not the worst team in the NFL. It happens to be the Dolphins.
They took it to the Fins, man. They actually pulled one out. It was great. Summer Steelers took a tough loss, though. That's for
I know.
Sure.
Yeah, and we traded Flacco to Cincinnati, and Tomlin was not happy about it. Now we know why.
Exactly. But hey, in college, man, clean sheet against Wisconsin, Ohio State. They're out there ripping it up.
They're looking good. Good. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the articles. I pulled some very interesting articles this week. I know Medium was down, so I think we have another source for the last article.
Yep.
But if people go to the initial link, Medium may or may not be down with the AWS outage, so we'll see. All right. How new CEOs can build a strong alliance with their boards. Why did I pull this in? Because there's some really great tips in here on how new CISOs can build a strong alliance with their boards.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that, the CISOs can use, whether it's relationships with the CEO, relationships with other executives, because at the end of the day, you get hired in. The board plays a big role in hiring CEOs. Obviously, other executives within the business play a big role in hiring the CISO. There's a honeymoon phase, but that honeymoon phase ends up disappearing once the operational realities kick in for the business, right? And then really you start getting into those, those conversations around making decisions and having to negotiate decisions. And then that honeymoon phase is gone. So reality kicks in and sometimes it can be tough. So building that alignment, making sure that you have the right expectations between you and the board or you and the other executives is a big deal. And it's not, you can't take that 30,000 foot view. You have to get specific. Otherwise, there's going to be big misalignment in expectations.
Yeah, the reason I like this was these are really great things CISOs, any executive, should think about in the interviewing process, right? Like I'm going in, we're going to, I'm interviewing. Well, what's the values and the culture of the company, right? Do I align to those or don't I? Because that's an important factor here, right? Do we know the strategic direction of the organization? Where does the CISO and your alignment to security strategy fit into that strategic direction?
Yep.
Right? Clearly define my roles and responsibility. Am I truly a C-level executive or you just title only, and I'm really just, general manager for the security division, right? Like there's really great pieces in here that I just thought were so important for any executive to look at, to make part of their hiring process, their interview process, because this is where if you want a seat at the table and you want alignment with your board, these tips help you just as much as they do a brand new CEO.
But those tips, to my point, Matt, those tips should be conversations you're having after you're hired as well, right? Because there's only so much you can do in an interview. There's only so much you can do in those 1, 2, 3 hours that you have that you're being interviewed. So these are aspects that you need to take back within your first 90, 180, your first year. You have to keep tabs on these things and make sure you're staying aligned, right? It's not just the interview process that you have to be thinking about this. It's throughout your career. You have to keep making sure you're aligned from a cultural perspective. Make sure that your roles and responsibilities are being updated. Think about all the disruptions that are happening with CISOs, right? All the new responsibilities that they've taken on over the years. That means those roles and responsibilities need to be updated.
Yeah, and a lot of these items, like it's not just the relationship with the board, right? It's your relationship with any key player, right? Any strategic person that you need alignment with in the organization, whether it be the CFO, legal, your CEO, or the board, right? You have to make sure you're doing these things so you're actually really building a deep relationship if you want to connect and you want long-term survivability.
Yeah, for sure. Next article, Inside the CISO Mind, How Security Leaders Choose Solutions.
Welcome to the circus.
Yes, exactly. Only 4,000.
This depends, like which VC you connected to and how many shares are being thrown out, right? Like that's
exactly
that all depends. But real CISOs, good CISOs, like it's a complex process, and I think a lot of vendors assume that they go right to the CEO and the CISO, and the CISO is making those buying decisions. I push that down. Like it's my directors, right? It's my senior directors who are actually bringing stuff to me, and I put a lot of weight on them to actually make those recommendations. And then I'm looking at my own independent research with peers, with other people in the industry, with VCs, because those are important. But I'm relying on that research and due diligence that the team has done, because if you're not trusting your team, you're not going to last very long.
I see
Jason shaking his head.
It's so funny. It's so funny. I took a note and literally I drew an arrow between problem definition and where it says research peers, VARs, and safe exploration, and I put team. That was my note. Like it's missing the team aspect of it, of where you bring in your stakeholders within your organization, your subject matter experts on the team, and you have them vet the problem. Right before I go out and I look for a tool or a blinky light, I'm going to the team saying, "Hey, how can we solve this?" They may come back and say, we need a tool. Or they're like, no, we got this internally. We can do this.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of in the middle of that problem definition and peers and VARs and all that stuff. It's sticking your team in there.
Which is why I structure every single interview.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say that's why I structure interviews on this show around problem, solution, value, right?
Yep.
Because you start with the problem, then you look for a solution. It may not be technology at all. It could be a process change. It could be some people. It could be whatever. Because then the third component they talk about in this article is obviously the budget, right? You can have the best solution in the world, but if it doesn't fit in the budget, nobody's going to buy it, right? And so these are important things that I try to extract out when we interview vendors on this show, because if you can't articulate the problem and how you solve it and drive value, it's not going to resonate.
Yeah, and you've got to drive your value position well, right? Like I've seen a lot of vendors, in fact, I was talking to one earlier today, right? Like it's about how you align and think about the other solutions that a CISO already has in place. And if your solution is coming in and isn't articulable in the same value proposition in the tools they're already using, like you're misaligned, and you're probably not going to get that. You've got to figure out what is the value you're bringing, how do I make best use of that, and how do I show that? Because that's what the CISO is ultimately concerned about, right? It's not about tool selection. Like you said, it's about people and process and making sure you have the right stuff. Do I already have a tool that does it? And if I need something else, what's the value it's bringing to the org? And how do I, as a CISO, then explain that to the rest of the executives and the board? Because I've got a fixed budget. Like it just isn't endless.
Yeah. And these companies have a lot bigger challenges than they did in the past, because that whole ecosystem approach that we've been talking about for the last 6 years, guess what? It's a real thing these days. And at the end of it, we're evaluating, do we already have licensing that can fulfill this need, accomplish the goal? And if we do, let's go. Let's use what we have. Let's use what we're already paying for, the ecosystem. So yeah, it's a lot more challenging these days to be able to convince a CISO to divert funds or spend extra funds from something they may already have in their toolbox.
Yeah. The other thing I try to...
Even very large organizations right now are struggling with that. Like, I can't just afford everything, right? I can't buy all 4,000 security vendors that are out there right now, right? So you may have something really cool that does something awesome and solves that 1% problem. But if I've got another technology that is solving like 80, 90% of that gap, like, what's the cost of filling in that 10%? And then I probably have some other capability that I'm still lacking that I need a functional technology for. So like filling in every particular use case and problem is just not functional now, right? It's gotta be a holistic solution that you're producing as a CISO that's minimizing the overall amount of risk, not looking at small little functional areas to address. It's risk.
Yeah, agreed. Now, I also look at this on the flip side. When I help advise vendors, everybody wants to talk to the CISO, but is that really your buyer? Right? Like, so I try to educate these vendors that sometimes a buyer isn't the CISO. It's different departments under the CISO. Back to the team concept, right? You have to know how to articulate how your solution solves the needs of the different team members that might be looking because they've been delegated or given the task to go research stuff. Not everything is messaging to the CISO. You have to understand your buyer personas and making sure your message resonates with the people who are out looking for these solutions, which typically isn't the CISO directly, which is the other thing that's in this article, right? So just some tips.
It's and sometimes it's a long tail, right? Because I think if you go down to the bottom of the article, it sums up that vendor relationship completely. And the last sentence is, in a world where every vendor promises to be the best, CISOs rely on something much rarer, trust. And a lot of times it's building that partnership trust at the end of the day. So it's a big piece.
Big piece. All right. World Economic Forum, why cyber resilience must be measured, not assumed. Considering everybody's recovering from an AWS outage today. This article is kind of timely, and it came out on Friday to boot.
Right? Yeah. I mean, kudos to the World Economic Forum for even putting cyber resilience at the front end of a conversation, right? I mean, I pulled that out right away, and I'm like, wow, all right, World Economic Forum, let's go start talking about cyber resilience out there. So for me, that was a true testament of how important it is globally these days that you have the WEF actually making a point to put this out there, right? So that's a huge piece of this. But, much like cyber risk, I think cyber resilience needs to be measured at the end of the day, right? You need to start putting some metric
around this. What are you doing without a true metric around this? If you're not actually instrumenting this and finding that out, I mean, they bring up a thing about like short, soon, like those words will not fly when you're trying to discuss resilience to an informed board.
Yeah. Yeah, and they talk about the areas to measure. I still would like to see a little more meat on this bone, right? Like guide them a little more. So there is this initiative out there called the Cyber Resilience in Industries initiative that the World Economic Forum did. I pulled it up. I didn't get a chance to go deep dive, but what I'd like to see is some of the actual metrics across these different areas that people should start looking at measuring themselves against, because everybody assumed if AWS went down, they would be fine. But yet there are sites that are still down.
Exactly.
This has been one of the things we've talked about for a long time, right? Like the fact that like you're putting all your eggs in one basket with these very large SaaS providers and MSPs, and like it's just like, yes, okay, you build resilience, and like sometimes for small mom and pop mid-sized companies, the security is better at these larger organizations, and you don't have to look at it as much. But you do have to look at resilience and what is your plan business alternative if these things go down and you can't deliver. Like it is a real thing. And I think, this is a great instance. This AW outage is a great instance for a lot of people to wake up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also the opportunity to go through your organization and classify the importance of these assets and these tools and these systems, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, and they pointed out here, consider cross-organizational factors to avoid narrow focus, right? This is where you collaborate with the rest of the organization and ask the question, what would happen to the business if your main application went down? Mr. and Mrs. HR, Mr. and Mrs. Finance, right? And go through the entirety of the organization and figure out where their appetite is, their risk appetite for systems going down. Then prioritize from there. Because now you know, guess what? My focus when AWS goes down is getting our ERP back online, or whatever the case may be.
Whatever it
that
is.
Application is.
Yeah. For some, it's their news site. We'll get there in a couple articles.
That's right.
2026 leadership strategy, mastering agility and anticipation for better decisions. I love this article.
I loved it too.
Yeah.
Amazing article, right? Because, you know, I tried to sum it up simply, where agility is quickly reacting or responding to a force coming at you. Anticipation is seeing around the corner. It's being proactive, seeing around the corner, trying to solve the problem before it hits you, right? So having that combination of agility and anticipation in your you know, executive toolbox, I think is super important. I love this article. So good.
Yeah, agreed.
They even put some great examples in here, by the way, from the anticipation and being in front of it before it blindsided them, right? And I remember we've talked about this before, like in 2015 when I wrote the strategy for Tenable, saying, hey, when the cloud becomes a thing, all these things are going to change around us. And they did. Now, it took a little longer, but again, it was trying to anticipate, what does the future world look like? And how do you prepare yourself for that future? And that's exactly what this article is talking about.
Yep. No, that's great. And again, having that combination of agility and anticipation is very important, because at the end of it, maybe when you're running through your anticipation exercise, you could be wrong. And guess what? You better be agile. You better be able to react to that, you know, if you made some incorrect assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. How many people are going to start rebuilding data centers after this outage?
I know, right?
Just saying. What does that mean? How do you anticipate that?
On-prem, let's go.
Right. Of course. All right. Why clear leadership beats cutting edge tools every single time?
Yeah. Now, this was a good article too, right? I mean, again, blinky lights and tools are enablers. They're not leadership. They're not direction from your executive leadership. They're not, you know, it's not the clarity and the vision and the mission. It's all the human side, right? You need leadership for the human factor. Tools enable, they're not leaders. So yeah, you know, you have to have a clear leadership strategy, a strong leadership strategy, and leverage the tools to, you know, augment and help surface your leadership and help spread the leadership. Tool is a tool.
Yeah, I don't really think tools ever essentially really solve a problem, right? Like it's the core underlying people and process thing that actually does that. Now, the tool can enable you to run faster, run smarter, but if you don't have that underlying process developed and the right people to run it, yeah, it's not going to go well, right? I mean, the outcome is going to be poor. And I think that's a lot of what we're doing with AI right now. We're trying to put AI in place without really understanding where we're trying to go. And so that ends up in poor decisions by AI because it's based upon poor input from the humans.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, if you gave me a nail gun, I wouldn't be able to make a cabinet for you. It's not going to happen, right? You need someone who knows the job, has been there, has been a leader. You can hand me the tool all day long. I'm just not going to be able to do it.
Right. Well, and that, Ben, you brought it up and I was going to go there. You know, people assume that I can train these AI things to replace certain leadership. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can, right? That there's a human element here. And we get into this in the last article that has to direct, that has to lead, that has to drive these, right? It's not a replacement. Now it can augment from a delivery perspective, but I don't think it replaces leadership. But some people think that maybe it can. I think that's a little dangerous.
I would love to invite whomever feels that way on this show to debate the three of us on that. Open invitation to anyone who thinks a tool can replace a good leader. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. Which leads us to the last article, which if you go to Medium, it's currently down, but there's other links for it. The most human strategic sought after tool in leadership is soft skills.
That's right. 100%. Something a tool's not going to provide.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you know, this is not a surprise at all. Since the day I started on this podcast, 6.5 years ago, I think at this point, this has been a conversation. The importance of soft skills, the importance of attitude and aptitude. We've been saying it for over 6 years. The importance of your ability to communicate, to articulate a problem, to interface with other departments and people in the organization. It's priceless. It's not just technical acumen. You have to have the soft skills. Have to have.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the key differentiator to a lot of people not just doing well in leadership roles, is they just don't have the soft skills to be able to articulate that, right? I mean, I often said, like, earlier in my career, I was a SE, right? And I used to define when I talked to people, when I was interviewing people to come work for me as SE manager, I'd say there's two types of SEs. There's sales engineers and there's systems engineers. I certainly need systems engineers, but they're uber technical, and I'm probably not going to put them in front of a client until it gets really, really hairy, and then I need that deep dive technical, because they're concerned about the answer, but they're not necessarily concerned about the relationship, right? And that's, you need those guys. But the sales engineers, I need somebody who's relationship driven, who can have the conversation, who understands the soft skills to move things ahead, when not to say something, right? How to have that conversation effectively. And so I've just taken that along in my career. I believe that's true. You've got people on your team. We all know these guys in security that are super, super smart, right? But would you put them in front of the board or the other e-staff? Probably not, right?
Absolutely
They're giving
not.
you the detail, and you're then breaking that down into something that's human consumable.
Right. And that's why I say attitude and aptitude are extremely important, because if I find a person who has the right communication skills, the right attitude, the right work ethic, I can train the gaps in the technical piece.
Yeah.
It is so much harder to do it the other way, because it's hard to change personality.
Yeah. And what I find is, so I see this in the hiring processes today. A lot of crutches using AI, and you can't bridge the gap on the soft skills side. It's creating this really, it's just this weird experience, right? Like, they don't understand the core technologies. So they're leaning on AI to produce code and do other things. They don't have the soft skills. It's actually really hard to find good quality, younger experienced people, because the experience is all wrapped around AI usage with low soft skills. And it talks about it a little bit in this article, and how that creates challenges for leadership. Like,
big time.
I want to hire, but now I got to go hire more senior people because they don't have the core skill set I need to actually be successful.
And I don't see it getting any better for the future workforce, because it's become a societal problem. You have no idea how many times, I mean, my son's in high school now. You have no idea how many times I go to a high school event, and every one of those kids is on a device like
On the phone.
this. And they are communicating to people 4 people down from them.
Yeah.
They're not having a conversation. I mean, it's to the point where my wife and I are like, all right, my 2 kids that I can control, your phones are down, they're gone. Go sit in the corner and talk to each other if you have to. I don't care. But put those things down. It's an addiction at this point. It's an addiction.
It really is.
Killing
I mean,
social
and
skills.
they've proven that. The science behind it has been proven, right? Like, I had a friend of my son's came to visit him the other day. His dad drove him down, and they had a buddy in the car. So it was the 2 kids driving with their dad. They sat in the back of the car, and the dad said they just talked to each other on their phones the whole time, like texting each other.
Yeah.
They're sitting in the same damn car.
Right.
Like, this doesn't work. And I think this breakdown in communication skills is a huge thing that we need to figure out how to address.
It's huge. So
Yeah.
Like, how many
for the
people
love
do
of
you
God,
have
as a
start?
leader, as a leader in your organization, for your teams, really start helping support their soft skills. Get them off their devices. Have meetings where you require laptops to be shut, phones to be flipped over or in pockets, and have meetings where you're starting to train social skills, because we need this next generation. the ones that are in the workforce now, and the ones that are about to have children, to teach those to the next level of workforce that's coming too. We need to flip this on its ear. We do. And as leaders in the workforce, it's our responsibility to break this chain. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah. And, you know, we used to do these trainings like 10, 15 years ago. It was conscious decisions to hold these trainings and these sessions and continue to do that. And it's kind of like gone by the wayside. We're all remote now. We just type into Slack. We do stuff via email. No. We need those soft skills back. We should be getting back together and doing those sessions we used to do 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Where we bring somebody in and facilitate these conversations and help us with our soft skills.
And empower the workforce. Because here's the thing. In my organization, we have a mantra. If you're in Microsoft Teams and you go back and forth with someone 3 times, you're done. You're done with the messaging back and forth. You're hitting that little telephone up in the little corner, and you're having a video meeting. You're getting face-to-face, and you're going to hash it out. I can guarantee you'll go back and forth for the next 3 hours in that messaging app versus 5 minutes on a video call.
Yeah.
I've had that same conversation. I mean, you've seen it where it's like it's moved slowly from from getting on the phone and talking, being in person, to being on the phone, to now like, you know, being on Teams, to text. Like it's the isolation and the shorter and shorter communication streams when you're missing all the detail that's in the middle and the visualization of looking at somebody and seeing their intonement on their face. Like, what are you trying to convey, right? And I think that's key. We've got to tell people, hey, pick up the darn phone, have a conversation with somebody.
Absolutely. And again, it's us as leaders who have to start mandating that and really flipping this habitual thing that we have. I get it. It's easy. We're on the fly. Type a message, let it launch, and then you don't have to forget. And then you can forget about it and not worry about it until a message comes back at you. But that's not efficiency. That's not effectiveness.
I think a lot of organizations are missing this because there's been this return, like after COVID, there was a gap, and now there's this big push and return back to work. We've seen a lot of tech companies, come back into the office. You're not going to get any better interaction if you don't foment this. If you don't say, come into the office, but like you can't just sit in the cube next to Jason, put on a headset, listen to music, and Teams him or text him. Like that's not, you might as well be at home. And that's, you see the pushback from a lot of people saying, why am I going to the office? Because it's the same thing, but I spend more time like in commuting. Yeah, because organizations aren't really doing the work of saying, put down the devices.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, it truly is one of those say easy, do hard kind of things, right? Because talk to each other. Nobody's going to listen. You have to actually police it and watch it and, force meetings where laptops are down. You know, as a leader, you should have your meetings with laptops shut. Shut the laptops, right? If they're in person, shut the laptops. If you have a remote meeting and it's over video, it's focus. Have an agenda that requires everybody to engage at one point or another, and they're not going to know when it's coming. They have to listen. They have to sit there and pay attention. They can't be multitasking if that's your agenda. Hey, by the way, agendas are a thing of the past. Make an agenda for your damn meetings, people. How about that? Make sure you have a purpose for meeting with folks.
Yes. Well, this agenda has ended. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.